All right, today I'm going to tie for you one of my sort of secret favorite Trico patterns. And Tricos are a little mayfly that hatches in the summer and fall. And the spinner fall can be some really cool dry fly fishing. I like that kind of techie dry fly fishing, and I figure I'll show you the pattern that I like to use. So what I'm going to start with is a 2488. And I'm going to tie you an 18 here just because it shows up better on camera. But typically I tie these in 20, 22, 24. Now 2488 is a 2 extra short hook, so 20 in this is going to be a fair bit shorter than what a 20 would be, say on a 101 or a standard dry fly hook. But what I'll do here is I'm going to start my thread about 2/3 of the, or I'm sorry, 3/4 of the way up the hook, just black 14-aught thread, and I'm going to wrap back, not really around the bend. I just want to stay up on the straight part of the hook here, and you can see my thread hangs about even with the point on the barb when I get where I want. And now I'm going to take 3 white microfibbets, tailing fibers. Tricos do have 3 tails, and I'll show you how to split these. And I like to make a fairly long tail. It's at least 2 shank lengths. Now the real bug has got a pretty long tail, but if you make your artificial tails, as long as the real bug, they can kind of push the fly out of the fish's mouth when he comes up to eat it. That's because the artificial tails here that we're using are going to be stiffer than the real bug's tails would be. So you have to kind of find a happy median there. But I'm going to tie those 3 tails in here on top of the hook. And then I'll just press my thumbnail up underneath them and separate them just manually. I just want to get 3 widespread tails there, like so. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a figure 8. So I've got my thread just short of the hook point. Now I'm going to come back behind the near tail and come up and over the hook. And then I'm going to come over and around the far tail. And I just did a figure 8 in there. Then I can kind of manually adjust those as needed. I like them to kind of be flat. I don't like them very elevated. That one's a little elevated. One of the cool things with microfibbets is they're synthetic fiber, so you can manhandle them and put them where they need to be. And that's our tail. So now I'm going to come forward on the shank, just over those butt ends of the tail, and I'll trim the stubs out. And then the other thing I notice about Tricos is they are a pretty fat, chunky little bug. So I want to make a fairly fat body on there. And I can see on the screen I've got a piece of frayed thread there, but I'll be damned if I can see that with my eyeball. Just disregard that piece of thread. We're going to cover that in a minute anyway. One of the things about standard Trico patterns, or most Trico spinner patterns that you fish, and they're very similar. It's just a spinner pattern, nothing fancy. But the catch being is that they're hard to see, especially when you get down in these tiny little sizes. So what I like to do is I like to put a hackle on mine, and what I like to use is a badger hackle, and I'll explain why here as we go. But I want sort of an oversized. This is a badger saddle, and I want a feather that's maybe just slightly bigger than the hook gap there. And I'm going to take this feather, and I'm going to strip some fibers off the bottom. And I'm going to tie this in here just around the midpoint on the hook. And I want to leave a little bit of bare stem beyond my tie down. Like so. You can see I've got just a little bit of bare stem down here. And I'll just leave that feather setting back. The other thing with Tricos is they're short and stocky. So very often I see them kind of tied stretched out. And I think that's something that you don't want to do. That makes the fly bigger. And we want sort of a short, stocky little fly. Now for the wing on this, I'm going to use some white polypropylene macrame yarn. And I've just brushed it out. And you can see it's got a fair amount of surface area from that braid. And that's going to make a huge difference in the flotation of this fly. So I'm going to tie this in at the center of its length with 2 turns. And then I'm going to pull the front wing toward me and bring my thread the other direction for a couple of turns. making those spinner wings. And I want to make sure those are squared up on the hook. Then I'm going to take and put just a little bit of black superfine dubbing in here, and it's really not going to take much. This is to sort of fatten up the thorax a bit and give us a nice base for our hackle. So I'm going to take this black superfine, and you could use beaver dubbing, any variety of dry fly dubbings. I do like something that I can dub real tight. And I'm going to pull both these wings up and kind of roll them together. And I'm going to start this dubbing just in front of the hook point, and I'm going to dub up to the base of the wing. Then I'll separate the wings, and I can figure eight between them. I'm going to need just a tiny bit more dubbing, I can tell. Put just another little pinch on there. Couple turns front to back, a couple more back to front, and then I'm going to round out that thorax. I want to end with bare thread up here just behind the hook eye. So right there is a pretty standard Trico spinner, nothing crazy out of the ordinary. But one of the things that makes these flies so hard to see is they sit very flat on the water. So we're going to add this hackle in. So I'm going to take these two wings again, just kind of roll them together in my fingers, and they'll stick together out of my way. Then I can take my hackle feather, and I want to jump right up onto the dubbing, and I'll get a couple turns behind the wings, one turn right at the front edge of the wings, and another turn. So just 3 or 4 turns, not many. I'll trim that hackle feather out. Nice little thread head, just a couple turns. And then I'll whip finish. Now what I'm going to do is kind of spread my wings out here. And you can pull them up, and you can use the hackle as a gauge for the length. I'm going to go just a bit beyond the ends of the hackle and trim those wings off so they're just short. And then the key part here is I'm going to turn the fly over, and I'm going to trim the hackle off the bottom. And this is where the badger hackle is important. Though I'll show you a trick where you could even use grizzly. But I want to trim this down. I want to trim all the stubble off of it. So a good fine tip pair of scissors is important here. And what that badger feather has is a black stem, so I don't get white hackle showing through onto the underbody. I want the bottom of the fly to be black, and you can see here, I'll turn this again for you to see. I'm just trying to get every little last bit out of there. One crazy one here on top, we'll get rid of him too. So you can see I've trimmed that perfectly flat on the bottom. Now, one thing that you can do, hold on, I'm going to find where mine went. Here it is. If you're using a grizzly feather, which you can use, a badger I think is better, blends in better with the wing, but your stem will be lighter color. You could come in with a black marker and just color that in on that thorax. Anything that you've got that's sticking out that's not black, color in. But what this gives us is a fly, get him turned here, that's got some height and some surface area to him. So it makes this fly much easier to see on the water. I can tweak those wings down just slightly. Just sort of brush them down, and you can see how that yarn makes a lot of surface area, so it makes a fly that floats really well. This is sort of my little secret weapon Trico pattern. This has been a fun one, and a lot of guys shy away from Trico hatches. I love them. A fly that you can see and a fly that they'll eat are not always the same thing. That's sort of the holy grail of Trico fishing. But this is the pattern that I've been using for the last, 20 years or so. Pretty cool little fly, real simple. One simple little addition, it's got that little bit of hackle on it, so it's got some surface area on top, so you can see it and find it a little bit better. I think the key is to keep the fly really sparse, keep the hackle very sparse, so that you don't Don't overdo it up there. But you can see that bottom profile is still pretty transparent with the wings, and a really nice chunky little silhouette for the body. You can see it's about 50-50 abdomen to thorax. They're short, stout little bugs, so don't stretch them out like you would a bigger bug. They're a different shape than most other mayflies. But that's my Trico spinner. There's that stupid blue shirt behind it too, because you guys all bitched and moaned. So don't act like I don't listen. All right, thanks for watching. I'm Charlie Craven. There'll be some more soon. I'll come up with something else. Hope you guys have a good day. Take care.